So I'm going to tell a little story about myself to start off with. Then I'm going to read a little Zen poem, and then I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about what I really want to talk about is the idiosyncratic quality of our own lives. Last month, I was trying to talk about, in my mind, there's a phrase, and it's kind of how did we get in the mess we're in? And then how do we get out? And of course, how we get out is the easy part because that's practice. So, what I'm going to try to do is spend a little bit of time on the mess we're in and the idiosyncratic quality of that. So, a little story from this week. Fair amount of you are my age or a little younger, or a little bit older, so you may understand this. Some of the younger folks may not know much of what I'm talking about. But this week, the death of an old rock musician, Sly Stone, was announced. And I see some nods in the room. These are the people closer to my age. In my childhood, like 13, 14, 15 years old, he was a really somewhat important figure. His music was kind of infectious for me. It was like for everybody else who's a teenager, it's a time of a lot of change. And his music, as I look back on it, was a lot about people being free and everybody being the same. There's one song he talks about a black person and a yellow person and a red person, and everybody is kind of fighting, but we're all the same person. And that, to me, was a real, in a sense, a real theme of my youth in the 60s, and it was quite important. So as I would hear his music over the last few days. So it'd show up in places. I'd hear clips of his music. What I kept finding is that I was tearing up. And there was some emotional response that I didn't really, I mean, I can explain it the way I'm talking about it, but many of us know that music is quite deep and music, in my mind, cuts through the rational mind and it hits something very deep. And I would imagine there were some people who teared up like I did, but most people didn't. It was kind of idiosyncratic to me and how it hit my emotions and what it meant to me. So I'm talking about this just to give that sense that each one of us, even if there's a situation that we're all going through, we actually each go through it differently based on kind of the circumstances of our lives, our own temperaments, and the conditions and the environments that we live in. So now a Zen poem. Many of you have heard me read this poem many times. In some ways, to me, this is one of the poems that very simply expresses the essence of Zen practice, kind of as I feel it and experience it. And it was also written by Zen Master Sung San, who was my teacher, the founding teacher of the Quantum School of Zen. So this poem is called Original Face. Your true self is always shining and free. Human beings make something and enter the ocean of suffering. Only without thinking can you return to your true self. The high mountain is always blue, white clouds coming, going. One more time. Your true self is always shining and free. Human beings make something and enter the ocean of suffering. Only without thinking can you return to your true self. The high mountain is always blue, white clouds coming, going. One of the things that touches me so much about this poem is that it starts with your true self is always shining and free. Now, we have a problem in English with pronouns. If I were writing this poem, I wouldn't start it with the word your. I would just start it, true self is always shining and free. Because when we say your, that actually is separating the world into me and you. And as I see it, that's the opening of the oceaning of suffering. So if I were to write this, I would drop the pronouns because pronouns are the way we identify ourselves and the rest of the world. And in that separation, suffering begins. But the important thing is we start off with the true self that's always shining and free. In our teaching, we have a Zen Master Sung San would call it primary point, before thinking mind. And that is the realm of true self. That's that, in my mind, in a sense, that's the world before it coalesces into form. It's not really a perfect analogy, but you could say almost something like energy and matter. That in true nature, it's fully, completely potential. Anything is possible. When we enter into the world of name and form, there are rules and conditions and causality. So I think for all of us as practitioners and just human beings to take in the reality that true nature is already shining and free. That is, in a sense, our basic birthright. That is what we are. Or at least we could say, if you enter into time and space, that's where we begin. And he says human beings make something and enter the ocean of suffering. The making something are the causes and conditions of our lives. We don't just appear out of a vacuum. Actually, our birth into this world comes from the DNA of our mothers and fathers. So already we start our embodied life in the world of name and form, in the conditionality of the experience. Our parents got their DNA from their parents, and it goes back and back and back and back. That is the way we go through time and space. We're embodied by this stuff we're created out of this stuff that we call DNA. You might call it a sperm and an egg. You can call it a lot of things. Science has a way of studying and naming, but we don't understand its origin. It's before thinking. We can study it, and human beings have this amazing capacity to learn, to understand, to build our knowledge on top of what's come before. And certainly over the last couple of 100 years, things have sped up quite a lot. Technology has increased and grown to where what we take for granted now is something like when I was a child, it was just like a joke. Like I grew up with the comic strip Dick Tracy. And Dick Tracy was a detective, and he had this watch that he could talk into, and people would hear him on the other end. And that was absurd. And yet, 50 years later, here it was, the invention of cell phones. And now we've got computers in our pockets that they say are more powerful than the computers that ran the entire space mission up to the moon. We have more computing power, more knowledge, more information at our fingertips than ever thought imaginable. What was kind of a joke, there was a TV show where a guy talked into his shoe. That was so ridiculous. And yet, maybe it wasn't as ridiculous as it seems. So it's a little bit off point, but we always have to remember what we don't understand. And what we now take for granted was something unimaginable just 10, 15, 20 years. And with this AI revolution that's coming, we have no idea what's going to be in 5 years, let alone 50 years. I have a friend whose son is a lead scientist in one of these AI companies. And the stories he tells me and the possibilities that they're afraid of are mind-boggling. So we really don't know. And that not knowing brings us back to primary point. Our true self is always shining and free. We don't know what reality actually is. But where we live in our everyday life is in the world of name and form. We're born into a world. Once we're born into our lives, we're born into very specific conditions and situations. Those specific conditions and situations start to mold us and form us. Now, we most likely come in through our DNA and who knows what else with certain temperaments, certain capacities. But by being buffeted by the world of name and form, we develop what becomes quite a unique personality. You know, when I was thinking about this talk, usually it gets announced. I'm not sure that Paul said it tonight, but my work, my paid occupation is as a psychotherapist. So I meet with people, many, many people, all week long, between my Zen practice, my psychotherapy practice, and then close family and friends. I'm probably talking and meeting with over 100 people a week. And though we like to lump people into similar traits, actually, each individual is completely unique. I can really see this, especially in my world as a psychotherapist, because where, in my mind, Zen and psychotherapy, there's like this amazing overlap. It's probably, you could think of it as a Venn diagram where, in my mind, it's almost an overlay. But of course, the modality is different. The way we deal with the stories of our lives is different. So in the particularity of working with people, I'm always working with those early conditions, how those early conditions impacted the development of the person I'm working with, and how those traits are actually playing out in their lives today. There's kind of a trite phrase in the psychotherapy world, is that when you're growing up in your family, you're struggling to deal with usually a complex and unstable situation. Life is difficult. It's just, Buddha said life is suffering. That's like the beginning point. Many of us are born into families that have been traumatized. My family, my father was a soldier in World War II. I was born into a Jewish family. The Holocaust was really just ended about 8 years before I was born. And the community that I was born into was deeply impacted by that. It was the water I swam in. I didn't know any of this, but yet I was shaped by it. I was also, I have an older brother and a younger brother, so I'm the middle brother. There's this whole concept of a middle child complex. The middle child often feels left out, unseen. And in my life today, even with all the work I've done with myself, I can see how that plays out. And actually, the main point I want to make here is that each one of us has a very unique way of living. So the second line in the poem, which really for this talk is the important line, it says, human beings make something and enter the ocean of suffering. And what I'm really trying to suggest here is that at the base of our practice, we have to deal with our own making. He says, human beings make something and enter in the ocean of suffering. When Zen Master Seung Sahn would talk about making, he would define it as holding, wanting, attaching, and checking. The Buddha simply said suffering arises out of desire. Zen Master Seung Sahn started to break it down a little bit. So if you just take those four categories, holding, attaching, wanting, and checking. Holding, wanting, and attaching, I think everybody basically understands. Checking is a little bit of a jargon. What it basically means is doubting yourself. It's carrying this self-doubt and how that impacts our lives. So all of us really do all four of those things. And you could separate people into big branches. So maybe some people are more prone to attachment. Some people are more prone to wanting. Some people are more prone to holding. Holding is kind of when you finally get what you want, you grab it really tight and you're afraid to let it go. And in that fear of letting it go, you hold it so tightly that you either kill it or you kill your own experience because you're so tight. Checking is the kind of thing, checking self-doubt. It's we in the West, we all understand that. I was reading something about this great basketball player from the Bay Area, Steph Curry, and he was talking about imposter syndrome and how, now, of course, he's branching out. He's doing a lot of things he's not trained for. But even the people who are at the best of something, still, there's this feeling, am I really good enough? Do I really have it together? The Dalai Lama claims that people in Asia don't have this. He didn't even understand this idea of not believing in yourself. Honestly, I don't believe the Dalai Lama. And I've had a little bit of experience working with folks from Asia, either in my therapy practice or in the Zen practice, and it's clear to me it's universal. Everybody struggles with feeling like enough. In this modern world, there's high expectations, and we often feel like we fall short, or we imagine we see somebody outside of us who's doing it better than us, and then we judge ourselves and criticize ourselves from that. So we all have all of those things, and you could lump people into four categories. But what I honestly think happens is that each one of us takes all four of those and weaves it into a very complicated caricature almost. And it's just kind of overlaid on us. So we're buffeted by life experience all the time. And much of the time, we don't know what to do. We feel buffeted rather than grounded and secure. So we're just flailing. And what we do when we flail is we rely on our old habits. One of the things we suffer from as human beings is what's called confirmation bias. And in this case, what I'm using it as is I've developed a very particular way of seeing the world and interacting with the world. And what confirmation bias does is when I believe something is true and I see that in the outside world, it confirms my belief. And often what happens is I miss what doesn't confirm my belief and I focus on what confirms my belief. So I make, in a sense, I'm making the noose even tighter because over time I reify my beliefs into what seems to be actual reality that I bump my head against. So you get the point. The important point here is each one of us has a very unique way of being in the world. And really what I want to say is we have when we're practicing Zen, Buddhism, life, call it what you will, when we're trying to get out from behind our conditioning and move into that freedom of true self, which is always shining and free, the path is right through that unique conditioning that we make. So each one of us has to find our own way of making things. And people can help us with that. When I'm working with somebody, I get to understand how they make something. And when they're making it, I can point it back to them. And oh, yeah. And then we can start to identify those ways we respond to stimulus in the world. And maybe, just maybe, we don't have to fall into the same behaviors over and over and over again, which are actually what is creating the suffering in our lives. We think the suffering comes from the outside, but we make our own suffering. And just to say a little bit here about a little bit of distinguishing between pain and suffering. The Buddha never said you can live a life without pain. He never said you can live a life without loss, without grief, without not getting what you want. It's none of us. I mean, the Buddha, the myth of the Buddha is he grew up getting everything he wanted, but it still was not satisfying. So in the third line of the poem, he says, only without thinking can you return to your true self. I know from hearing him talk about this poem that he's not telling you to stop thinking. And the most simplest way of saying it, when he says without thinking, he's really meaning not attaching to your thinking. Thinking comes, thinking goes. My desires come and they go. He's saying don't attach to them. For our purposes here, what I'm saying is what he's really saying is if you break free of the way you make things, automatically you're already free in time and space. Your true self is always free. And that freedom is right there for us. It's not something that's far away. It's not something that we have to that we have to search for. It's right here. And the way we get it is through our practice. And the way we practice is to take these practice tools and apply them specifically in the moment of our lives. It's not Zen practice, in a way, it's not very esoteric. It's like, boom, meet the moment. What is it right now? So What I'm really saying to you is that the essence of our practice is to uncover the unique ways we create our own suffering, and then in the moment, actually work with it. Find the crevice, the little crack that opens us up to the true self, which is always shining and free. So I'll close right now with something that I like to borrow from Zen Master De Kuan. Zen Master De Kuan is a nun. She's a Chinese nun that it runs our group in Hong Kong. And she came up with a very, many of you have heard me say this, she's come up with a way of remembering how to practice in the moment. And she calls it A, B, C, D, and E. A stands for awareness. A really means put it all down, let go for a second, become aware of the moment. Because usually we're just unconditionally responding without any awareness or understanding. So our first step is to become aware. What am I? What is this? We say in our practice, ask the great question. Stop. And when we stop, just for a moment, in our school, we use this metaphor of it's like the smack of the Zen master's stick that, oh, and we wake up for a second. So when you notice something, you notice you're holding, you notice something particular about the way you do something, stop. That's A, become aware. B is find your breath. Ground yourself. Take a moment to stop the train. Take a breath. By taking a breath, we can find our center rather than running out of ourselves, getting stuck in things. We can bring our energy down into our lower abdomen. When Paul gave meditation instruction tonight, I believe he talked about breathing down into your lower abdomen. We get stuck in our thinking, or we get stuck in our feelings, and our energy is always up. If you look at how you live your life, we're often shooting our energy out. What this says is take a moment and bring your energy back down into your lower abdomen, which in the Japanese tradition, they call the hara, or the center. In Korea and China, they call it the tangen, the energy garden. I kind of think of it, if you watch the way, if you look at the way a squash grows or pumpkin grows, the vine goes out like this, and there's a place where the individual pumpkin connects to the vine. This is just metaphor. I'm not saying it's true, but that's how I think of our lower abdomen, or our energy garden, or our center. It's the point which connects with true self, with the universal quality of being alive. So bring your energy down to your center. You know, we all talk about when you're centered, you can respond one way. When we lose our center, we just fall into our habitual patterns. So bring your energy down to your center and remember that you don't know. That's a D. Don't know opens up. When we think we know, we shut down. When we don't know, we open up. Using a different phrase, Suzuki Roshi said, a beginner's mind is a mind that is curious and doesn't know. An expert's mind closes down because I already know this. I don't have to think about it. So come back to don't know, and then boom, come back to your moment and make an effort to wake up, to not fall into the old traps. This is easy to talk about, not so easy to do. But in the way I'm speaking about it here, our everyday life is the field of our practice. We come to the Zen Center to sit together, although most of us also have a sitting practice at home. Next week, we have a 1 day retreat here on Saturday. So we come to the Zen Center or we'll meet online and we'll do a long meditation. Every other month, in our schedule, it's going to be in September and November, we do a 3 day retreat. Back at the end of February, the beginning of March, we did a 2-week retreat. In Korea right now, they're in the midst of a 90-day retreat. So there is a real focus and emphasis on long sitting because the long sitting helps us do and discover the kind of things that I'm talking about today. But most of our life is spent in the interactions of our work, our families, our friends, our community, the sorry for a little editorializing, but the craziness that we're living through in our country and really all over the world right now. These are things we have to manage. And if we can bring our practice right to the uniqueness of our own experience, that's how we can wake up. This isn't some esoteric fantasy. It's actual, alive participation in our life. And if we really do it seriously, not glumly, but seriously, there is a possibility of liberation and of freedom and a way of opening our hearts and minds in a way that we can actually help the world, help our loved ones, and be of service to making the world a better place, which I'm smiling inside. That brings me right back to Sly Stone, because that was his point. We have the possibility of in our own worlds, in participating just in the world that we live in, we have the possibility of making this world a better place and helping to relieve the suffering that exists in our own lives and the suffering of the people around us. Not only the people, the planet, the animals, all of it. We have that potential. But if we don't do our work, as we used to say, then you're just part of the problem. If you don't work on your own awakening, you're just continuing the suffering of the world around us.